Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the ILI for their kind invitation. It is really good to be literally back in Kampala again, even though if it is virtual. And my first visit to Kampala was for last May when I attended the blockchain conference. And here I would like to pay special thanks to Neha, Elizabeth, Sweetin, and the entire team. This session carries important keywords: enabling environment, innovation, private sector, and Africa, all of which are important in a contemporary context. Our continent has enormous potential, and according to the African Development Bank, it is the world's second fastest growing continent. The Africa Outlook report forecasts that economic growth is set to be at 4.3% in 2018. This is indeed a healthy growth rate that would be the source of envy in the industrial economies. Yet, despite these glowing statistics, our continent is home to 15% of global population, produces only 3% of global GDP, while carrying 25% of global disease burden. Africa accounts for just 2% of world research output, 1.3% of research spending, and 0.1% of world patents. Furthermore, we are faced with over 100 million African children who, according to the Internet for Education in Africa report, have never seen the inside of a classroom. Equally troubling and of no less importance is the healthcare sector. With serious diseases like Ebola, malaria, cholera, meningitis, and HIV/AIDS still threatening a great number of African lives, we cannot afford to be complacent. The same Africa Outlook report shows that at least half of the population resides more than 25 kilometers from the nearest fiber connection. While we may be celebrating the growth of connectivity in cities across Africa, last mile connectivity is still a major stumbling block. Yet, the World Economic Forum reports that the continent leads in mobile adoption and can offer the biggest cross-sectoral economic opportunities. The 2017 World Economic Forum for Africa Summit in Durban, South Africa, clearly showed that private sector intervention is needed to steer the continent to a more sustainable, inclusive, and prosperous future. Take the case of Samsung of Korea. It is in the private sector that the resources to invest in people and products development exist. As Samsung has discovered firsthand, each investment, whether in education or healthcare, or perhaps even both, has the potential to transform hundreds of lives at a time. Samsung's social intervention, such as the solar-powered internet schools, which are equipped with interactive whiteboards, Samsung Galaxy Note PC and printers, and telemedical centers, which provide a variety of key medical and health services, have had a real impact in improving livelihoods. Through innovation, which remain the cornerstone of a knowledge-based economy, we believe it's possible to start changing the status quo. Ladies and gentlemen, close and effective partnership between higher education institutions and various sectors of society will no doubt strengthen the university's capability and relevance as influential players in today's globalized and knowledge-based economy. In most of our universities, the teaching style has to become more action-oriented as it encourages experiential learning, problem-solving, project-based learning, creativity, and is supportive of peer evaluation. There is a need to foster a culture of enterprise and innovation, and innovative education emphasizes imagination, creativity, and risk in business. Knowledge and communications revolution are now major drivers of growth and are becoming an accepted principle of contemporary higher education for developing countries and being used to advance growth, create jobs, and improve well-being. An innovative society must also cultivate a culture of risk-taking, something that is still alien to most African cultures. This is not something that we should be left to business schools. During my tenure, I placed priority on giving a voice to initiatives to promote collaborative science on the continent. As the famous African proverb says, to go fast, walk alone. To go far, walk together. However, investment in innovation is critical for economic development and has the potential to yield a sustainable and ultimately scalable rate of return, and must be an absolute and fundamental shift in the continent's traditional business model. Ladies and gentlemen, when compared to Singapore and Korea and other emerging economies, we find that there is heavy investment in research and development at state level, yet African states are still not doing enough. Research and development investment at state level remains insufficient, and besides direct investment into research and development, most African states still have a long way to go in developing the core infrastructure needed to stimulate innovation at a globally competitive level. There is still this lingering perception that innovation is expensive. Is it? Can innovation happen in isolation? No. I think one example, when in West Africa, the pharmaceutical sector is facing challenges with counterfeit drugs flooding the market and putting lives at risk, there is a system that helps in differentiating between fake and genuine drugs. E-pedigree tracks products from factory to pharmacy. Is innovation always high-tech when we know that it is 5% technology and 95% imagination? So what are the barriers to innovation in the public sector? Firstly, the sheer size and complexity of public sector institutions. Silo mentalities is usually rife. There are skills shortages and gaps, lack of clear agreement with respect to perceived problems, approaches and solutions, as well as overlap in responsibilities and communication difficulties. Added to that are many other issues, including internal and external politics, bureaucratic and over-regulated work environment, poor leadership, budgetary issues, and poor learning environment. Public service managers and politicians are generally very wary of enacting changes that may result in negative outcomes, particularly if there is the risk that these will attract media focus. This risk aversion, added to an inherent blame culture with its associated high levels of accountability, contributes to a work environment that is often hostile to innovation. Part of the improvement of the public sector workforce is to encourage entrepreneurs or champions with sufficient vision and determination to push the innovation process through. These people should be given funding, responsibility, and leeway to pursue the innovation agenda. Staff mobility should be encouraged between institutions, and involvement and commitment developed by encouraging civil servants to take initiative while providing them with a safe space to innovate. Meritocracy must be our guiding mantra. At policy level, it is important to reach for a good balance between competent bureaucrats and creative policy entrepreneurs. Shaking the system is often a necessary evil, as a reorganization measures against organizational lock-in and stagnant waters. So what is missing across Africa that holds back innovation? Missing across Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, are infrastructure development as well as IT backbone needed to lift African countries. A digital revolution is closely linked to social innovation. Innovation spaces help young entrepreneurs to structure their approach while keeping all of their social transformation potential intact. Also, for African business to succeed, it is vital for young entrepreneurs to maintain collaborative links that help them keep in touch with peer-based learning dynamics, especially in the light of sea changes taking place at all levels. This raises questions concerning the conditions that are most conducive to fostering the emergence of innovative startups in Africa today, particularly in the digital sector. Africa has two key advantages to make a dent into innovative practices. It has a young population and increasing high mobile phone penetration. By 2050, it will count close to 1 billion well connected young people under 18 years old. This young population is helping to drive the transformations that are gradually changing the face of Africa, particularly through the creation of digital startups. For example, in Niger, one of the world's poorest agrarian countries, farmers are being connected by e-irrigation and e-assistance system set up by Abu Mamani Khan's Innovate enterprise. This award-winning young entrepreneur has designed an irrigation system that can be switched on remotely via mobile phone. So telephones are a constant in all of these transformations. Nearly everyone uses one, even in the remotest areas, and telephone-internet convergence is increasingly important, especially since the advent of 3G and 4G broadband. Therefore, creating innovation spaces will provide young entrepreneurs with a forum in which they can meet and exchange experiences with their peers while preserving links and a similar mindset, particularly in terms of peer-based learning. In a nutshell, these spaces are created specifically to maintain and reinforce their innovation potential. Talking of agriculture, late Calestus Juma had argued forcefully that neglect of agriculture has been a defining feature of Africa's economic policy over the last 4 decades. Thankfully, this may be changing. Public and private sectors alike are now taking a renewed interest in agriculture, and this focus is not without basis. According to the African Development Bank, when agriculture stimulates growth, it is twice as effective at reducing poverty than any other sector. Scientists are making advances in seed and fertilizer technologies, but creative solutions are also needed to improve market access and coordination, as well as to mitigate the impacts of climate change. But which solution have the potential to instigate real change? Cutting-edge scientific research methods are being leveraged to improve crop performance. In one example, food manufacturing giant Mars is assisting in the quest to boost the continent's cocoa yields through genetics. Using its production base in Côte d'Ivoire, the world's leading cocoa producer, Mars, publicly released cocoa trees genome that the company's agricultural research department mapped in partnership with the US Department of Agriculture and IBM in 2010, so that scientists everywhere can have access to it for their research. This fundamental tool has helped in the breeding of water and nutrient-efficient trees. Such innovations also take into account longer-term challenges to the sector. Any discussion of agriculture and productivity across Africa has to incorporate a conversation about the impacts of climate change. The continent is no stranger to environmental catastrophe, but as climate impacts begin to accelerate, the hottest, driest regions of the world will experience acute pressures with far-reaching adverse impacts on food security, nutrition, health, spread of deadly diseases, including the scourge of malaria, and so much more. Tellingly, Africa has the least capacity to adapt to these changes. In conclusion, let me reiterate the centrality of Africa's private sector to mobilize innovation for growth, jobs, and environmental protection. Ladies and gentlemen, the latest 2018 Global Innovation Index shows that no African countries have made it into the top 10 list of innovative countries. It is also important to note that the top 10 countries maintain their ranking steadily for the past 2 years, making it that much harder for emerging economies to move higher up in the ranking. This must change. I would also like to note that even as Sub-Saharan Africa was placed last in the list of regions, it has some strong individual performers. 6 out of the list of 20 innovative achievers, those countries that outperform on innovation in relation to their development, are from Sub-Saharan Africa. Kenya at 78, Rwanda at 99, Madagascar at 106, Malawi 114, Mozambique 115 have been on this list at least 3 times in the past 8 years. These positive trends must be sustained and enlarged so that more countries can rise higher up in the Global Innovation Index. So I would like to conclude by underscoring that none of the advances outlined in my presentation will occur without the full and equal participation of women. Without this capacity, it would be very difficult to speak meaningfully of empowerment because the fate of women will continue to be determined by others. For this reason, the right of women to have a voice, to be their own representatives, and to gain bargaining power lie at the heart of the opportunity for women to seize their own destinies, not least for all those women working in private and public sectors, fighting and succeeding